Mm. So, yeah, as was mentioned, we're talking about a journey here with Whakatohea that is over 20 years old. And it began with the aspirations of some of our kaumātua to get a consent for open ocean aquaculture space. And that was really about thinking about what would be opportunities in the future. And for most of them, they didn't see what it's turned into. As you know, they've passed away over the past couple of decades. But there's definitely there's still a couple of them around who have been able to sort of see the fruits of that work. And part of it has been sort of weaves in both with the aspirations which we had, but also the different opportunities that have come along over that period as well, and different sort of kind of changes in the operating environment. And one of those things has been the discussions we've started to have around our treaty settlement, and that being a place where we wanted to restore our mana, our sort of influence in relation to the Moana, and in particular these areas the area out into the Moana. And this is the sort of the Rohe Moana, which we say is our area of interest. From Marae Tōtara over by the Ohiwa Harbour down to Tarakeha on the eastern side. And you'll see in here the space that has already been consented, 3,810 hectares, which was what our kaumātua applied for over 20 years ago, and which we've had a consent for around 10. And then some new spaces which we're trying to have reserved through the settlement process, part of which the A block has already been consented. And this aspiration has then turned into some real things happening in terms of the farm being developed. There's two mussel boats that are owned by the Whakatohea Mussels Pōtiki Limited Company, of which the iwi is a minority shareholder in. And they've just commissioning a third boat. So the sort of generation of activity out on the water. There's the mussel factory, which is under construction at the moment, due to open in the next month or so. And so in Pōtiki, the activities that can happen out on the ocean in a commercial sense are driving opportunity within the town. And so that's through the generation of these sort of different enterprises, but also, we're talking for Whakatohea Mussels, they had 17 employees at the end of last year. They're currently at 29, and by July it'll be 107 once the factory starts. So it's not just, it's actually providing livelihoods to an area like Pōtiki, which has been pretty depressed economically for a number of years. Alongside that activity, there's also the development of the harbour, which is something which the iwi has supported as well. So Whakatohea itself, we had three priorities. One was to develop a successful mussel farm, another one to develop a thriving aquaculture industry, and the third one was to have the harbour development supported. And this as well was a sort of a 10-15 year, or actually probably longer, 15-year project to get that to come about. But in putting infrastructure in the community, it allows it to also develop. So these things are all things that in some ways are building opportunity for us around the blue economy. However, alongside that, we're conscious that we do need to be aware of issues of sustainability, what's happening in the environment. And so this is the buoy that's out on the farm, which is being put there by Cawthorn. And so the data that comes off this is part of the scientific data that is then used to help us understand the conditions. And we've just had a meeting this morning of Eastern Sea Farms, and we're talking about the benthic report, and we're doing the phytoplankton sort of assessment. So there's a whole range of monitoring activities that have to be done out there, so that we're in a position to think about how we're balancing the economic interests, but also the environmental interests as well. And this is not being done just with sort of scientific data, but also taking into account our customary knowledge, our own mātauranga that relates to places along the coast and the significance of them for different activities. So we can be thinking about our customer interests as well, and people will be maybe aware that they've just been through the customary marine title hearings in the High Court, and so those protected customary rights and customary marine titles are also being granted into the same space. So we're dealing with commercial interests, customary interests, and then thinking about environmental interests as well. And over the past 10 years, we've been through the Whakatohea Māori Trust Board, have really been thinking about the different ways we need to start bringing information in to help us make decisions, but also starting to put in place strategies. And some of those strategies have been about research. And this was, work that was done with Cawthorn around what things do we need to know to move into a sort of that blue economy space. But also what it means from a commercial point of view, which is the other, which is related, but often gets driven by kind of other stakeholders or other entities within our sort of iwi umbrella. And so between this sort of mix of pulling these things together, there's also then the things that sit alongside those commercial activities. And often it's not the iwi itself that's driving the commercial activity. We have participate in the company that runs the space. We're a part of the company that's developing the farm. But as the tribal entity, part of our focus has been on supporting the training. So the training programs, which are getting people ready to then take on the job opportunities as they come up, whether those are on the boats as the skippers and working on the farm, whether they're in the factory, or whether they're working on complementary activities as well. So that is thinking about that kaitiaki-tanga element from across cultural, environmental, and customary spheres. So one of the other activities we've been involved with is actually working on the Moana Project, and so this is led by Met Service, and it's around understanding marine heat waves. And so that was really important for us, because it gave us a chance to think about what was the implications of that on our interests, whether they're cultural or customary in that environmental space, or the potential environmental effects. And so we decided we wanted to put together a Rohe Moana plan to describe how we want to care for the moana for our mokupono. So really, what's our responsibility to that space, and in an intergenerational sense. And it has been, because of our sort of the interest in the space, which we've identified, I've already talked about in the context of the settlement, but that we know from the activities out on the water over the past 10 years that there is variation. And there's a climate variation, there's a seasonal variation, but then there's a broader climate variation. And we need to be able to respond to that, because it has an effect on how much spat we get, whether the spat settles right, how the mussels grow. So a lot of decisions we're making are going to be affected by things that happen in this kind of broader climate. And so we're fortunate that part of our interest out there allowed us to become a case study and a research partner in the Moana Project. And so the Rohe Moana plan, which we are putting together, is going to provide a sort of a holistic view of our marine space, and do it from, and sort of link together our sort of values base on how we want to interact across that, or control or have influence over what things are done in that area, and connect it to really a marine planning tool. So one of the things that had been mentioned by one of our advisors in the environmental space was just saying that actually there hadn't been any places where we can really effectively engage with coastal planning documents. And so we'd already started a process of thinking about how we would manage the marine spaces together as an aquaculture management area, but then being able to connect that into the coastal area as well was important, given that most of our farms are, up to 8 kilometers offshore. And so the content of the plan, and this is being, developed at the moment, is really that talks about kura kiota, kura ki tai, which is really the schools of fish that you can catch close to the shore and the schools which catch out in the ocean. And so just using the idea of kura to frame the engagement processes and the authority of kaitiaki to make decisions about particular places, our uara or our values, and how those values, interests and priorities can be reflected in a way which is really transparent. The sorts of raomi, whether those are maps, understanding the physical and biological character, those sorts of elements that are being that we draw on to make decisions about what can happen, and then the aringa part. So what sorts of actions that would then inform, and with which agencies those actions are going to be best to deal with. So that's what will become the content of the plan. And here's the roadmap which has been we've been working on. So it started in 2019 and was delayed in part by all of the challenges that COVID brought to us. But we're fortunate in some ways that the MACA processes were underway, and that there was a lot of research that was required for that process, which brought forward mātauranga and understanding about customary interests across those places. So that was able to inform some of the mātauranga content. We've had engagement with our various hapu to get their input into it as well, and the plan is being drafted at the moment. So we're hoping to have it ready for implementation in 2022. And I think what's the purpose of going down this track? I think having a tool or having a Rohe Moana plan is really about providing that kind of transparent focus so everyone can see what our interests are and the sorts of priorities that we're wanting to move towards. There's obviously a range of tools that are required after that to allow us to bring together the information so that we know we're working into that. We're working towards the objectives that we would like to see, and we can kind of track those in different ways. So that's another component which we're thinking about. But certainly in terms of outcomes, this is the vision for the Whakatohea Māori Trust Board, which is another whakatauki we have, ko te kaihoki e Waiwa. And so the ability for us to sustain our people, both physically, because we're growing, we've got this aquaculture industry and growing things from the ocean, but also culturally that we can sustain our people through, really our mātauranga and supporting our language and cultural identity within our rohe. So kia ora, everyone. That's I'm sure it would have been much more interesting to be there with you. So kia ora.